question comes from the Stanford group, and they say, Mr. LaRouche, we participated in a seminar about 2 weeks ago with Professor Galbraith, and we came up with some proposals that we'd like to run by you. Some of them we all agree on, but there's one body of policy that is causing some controversy. As a group, we agree that there is really no alternative to putting the banks into receivership and restructuring them, and that really, from our standpoint, is a no-brainer. At the same time, what we've proposed is that while this is happening, that we establish what is essentially a publicly run bank to provide credit for businesses that are sufficient to keep them running through the crisis. And this institution obviously would be modeled on the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. Again, our memorandum of understanding coming out of this seminar is straightforward on these points, and we'd be happy to share it with you. Also, on the question of the long-term economic reconstruction, again, we were pretty much in agreement among ourselves, and I think that the proposals that we've come up with in our memorandum are things that you would more or less agree with. The point of controversy, however, came up when we began to address what we absolutely must address, which is the immediate emergency that the current slump is creating for our citizens. And Professor Galbraith made some proposals, and some of us had some proposals, but this really is a point of great controversy, and we'd appreciate your comment on it. Professor Galbraith emphasized that one of the things that disturbed him was the reoccurrence of the emphasis on the idea that Social Security and Medicare were causing problems. And he said that he thinks that the current preoccupation that's coming out of Washington with these two programs is extremely dangerous to the prospect for economic recovery. And we agree with him. But the proposals that we're playing with, many of them came from Dr. Galbraith, some of them came from others, but we just don't see any way around it, and we'd like you to comment on whether you think this is valid, whether you think it's inflationary, et cetera. First of all, given the situation that the elderly in this nation face, and they really do face a very difficult situation because they're being hit on a number of different fronts. Their home values and their stock values have declined radically. Whatever interest they were collecting on cash holdings similarly have declined. Therefore, the only viable solution that we were able to come up with is that Social Security benefits should be increased, not cut. We also thought that while overall health care policy was being debated, that an emergency lowering of Medicare eligibility should be implemented, in which the age of eligibility would be brought down to 55. We also thought, and this obviously was a source of enormous controversy, but we thought that the payroll tax, at least on lower income people, should be placed on holiday. And particularly in light of the fact that President Obama's 90-day moratorium on foreclosures has now expired, we thought that measures to mitigate foreclosures to keep people in their homes had to be taken immediately, and that the freeze should be extended. And then finally, we recommended that fiscal assistance to states and municipalities be made open-ended so that we could put an end to job cuts in what are essentially vital public sections. Now, this has caused nothing short of hysteria from our bosses in Washington, and from even some people who we work with. But we don't see any alternative to taking these measures. And since this administration says it wants to take an FDR approach to the current crisis, it's also our assertion that this is how FDR would have dealt with it. But obviously, these measures are costly, but they are necessary. And it's our argument that however costly they may be, they probably are not nearly as costly as the amount of money that the government is prepared to spend to bail out the banks. And the difference here is that this actually could provide relief, whereas the bank bailout probably won't provide any, not even in the medium term. But we'd really like your comments on this because, again, it's a problem we have to deal with, and we want to deal with it responsibly.
Well, I think what everything you proposed, which is considered controversial by some people, was valid. The problem here, I think, is something has to be added to this. The measures are correct, but the question is there are certain consequences of these measures which also have to be taken into account. In general, first of all, look at one aspect of this, the pensions, the senior citizens. I don't feel like a senior citizen, but I see a lot of people my age group and younger who are considered senior citizens, and I see the plight that they go through. I'm just too stubborn to be a senior citizen. But my stubborn youthfulness, which is hated in me by my enemies. I'm hated more for that reason than anything else. I'm still alive. What are you doing alive? We thought we'd be rid of you by now. But they're not rid of me yet. They may take drastic measures, you know. I didn't always threaten that. Now, the problem here is we have to look at two things. First of all, we have been operating with promises, and promises that everything is going to be fine with your 401k, that this is all going to work, that everything is guaranteed. Don't worry about it. Trust us. Trust us. Well, what happened? The pensions got wiped out. The guaranteed prosperity, the protection got wiped out. The insurance companies got wiped out. Everything they depended upon. Everything is being taken from them. When they're unable to defend themselves by their own means against what is being done to them by the present incumbents of the U.S. government, the Congress in particular, in general, and by the corporations. This was great thievery. What was done by Hank Paulson, you shouldn't have hung him, because that would have stopped his suffering. Other remedies should be found, and we are going to provide some. The penalty of ridicule. He is going to be ridiculed by us in ways that will be infectious, and he will be fleeing, changing his name, disguising himself, probably even growing hair on the top of his head, or such other desperate measures to this. But the point is, we owe it to our citizens because they are citizens, because of their status, to provide them protection against the consequences of that bunch of idiots in the presidency and the Congress who led this nation into these catastrophes. We are responsible. And who is most responsible? The super rich. The super rich. The useless, ever-sucking super rich. So therefore, the federal government tax policy will reflect that. Why not? First of all, we do have to take over the question of pensions and health care. But we have to do more than that. Look, the whole healthcare racket in the United States is a great swindle which affects mostly people in senior years. It's a swindle. What happened to the general hospitals? What happened to the excellent system of hospitals in New York City as a result of Felix Rohatyn's work? Huh? What happened to these things? You know, you get sick, you go to the doctor, you have to go through this hurdle. You have this contact, that contact, go here this week, go here next week, you get an appointment for that 3 weeks from now, you get an operation 2 years after you're dead. There are certain faults in that system. So simply putting money into them is not going to cure the fault. What is happening is the doctors themselves are being swindled, the system is swindling them, and doing even worse swindling against the patients, against the population. What we need to have is what we learned from World War II, medical experience in World War II. We consolidated a system of general hospitals. You got sick in a neighborhood, you could walk into one of the outpatients of a general hospital system. You get into that through your physician and so forth, voluntarily. You don't have to go through this. You don't have to go through an intermediary of this crap. And we were able to deliver better medicine more cheaply under that system than under the crazy system that was introduced now. The way this system, the medical system, was created, recrafted, was to impoverish the physicians, to eliminate as many as possible through medical risk insurance, to increase the cost of everything, and the drug companies sat on top of it all. So we've had a system whose intention, in terms of its embodied function, was criminal. Our law says no law, no practice is condoned, which is contrary to the general interest, the general public interest. These were obviously against the public interest. They're against most people today. The policy now is to accelerate death. You have a terminal illness, come back 2 years from now. We might do something for you, if you're still alive, which we are confident you will not be. So in this case, in the medical area, we really have to revamp the whole system. We have destroyed the excellent medical system we had in the aftermath of World War II. We've destroyed it. We have to put it back. We have to rebuild the same kind of capability, the same policies that we had then. The medical profession, who's making money? The drug companies. You compare what it costs to get certain pharmaceuticals, prescription pharmaceuticals in the United States with what they cost in various parts of the world, like Canada, various parts of Europe, and so forth. The pharmaceutical companies are the great swindlers and part of the great swindle. So therefore, you have two sides to the problem. First of all, you have the need to create the generation of income which will allow us to commit ourselves to make these payments which are necessary. That means we have to get rid of green. We're against pollution, but you get rid of green. We now go to a high technology orientation, which is what we were based on. We go to high technology industries, energy dense industries, which means nuclear power right today. You can't do it without nuclear power. Stop wasting money on solar cells, windmills. What's your technology level of windmills? As a matter of fact, the windmill industry is subsidized. It's a fraud against the people. The reason it's able to operate is because it's protected. It's subsidized. Solar power, subsidized. It's not efficient. It's useless. Get rid of this policy. Now, go to high technology industry. Rebuild, stop this highway policy. The whole highway system is crazy. You have people forced to spend as much as in this area, 2.5 hours a day each way commuting from West Virginia or elsewhere into jobs around Washington. What the hell does that do to family life? You say you care about family life, social welfare, general interest? What are you talking about? We used to have a system in the United States where you didn't have giant corporations calling everything. You had all the basis of our economy was largely smaller firms, smaller enterprises, located in various parts of the country, local agriculture, so forth. So you had an economic distribution of activity, of productive activity, in various parts of the country. And in general, most people then could get a job, a decent job, within 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour commuting time at most each way. People would move into areas where the job was there, where they could commute within 15 to 20 minutes or half an hour at most to get to the job. What happens if you have 2.5 hours commuting on each end of the job day? What happens to family life? Who cares? So the problem is we have to restructure our economic policy in a way which is consistent with supplying these proposed remedies. The remedies are morally right. They're right economically. The question is, how do we pay for them? We pay for them by increasing the efficient productivity of the nation per capita and per square kilometer. Restore American agriculture. Monsanto is not in charge of life. Monsanto never invented a living process. It never invented life. So why is it taxing it? Why has it got a monopoly on life? Was that a new form of slavery? My vegetables were in slavery to some foreign corporation? We've got to stop the idiocy and go back to the idea against Prince Philip, against the World Wildlife Fund, that fascist should not be running the world with his policy. And Al Gore should go there and be the house servant for this pig and not bother us anymore. As a matter of fact, he's too big, he's too fat. Our doorways are not large enough to handle him in and out. We're not going to expand our doorways to let him in. So therefore, we have to make revisions in our policy. We have to make sensible revisions which are consistent with our history as a progressive nation, with our best periods. We are going to be just. We're going to protect our citizens. The right to life is sacred. The right to a decent life, to protection, is sacred. We're going to provide the systems which are oriented to human beings. And these are proposals which are in dispute in this question, which are perfectly legitimate. They're necessary measures. The question is, how are you going to pay for them? Well, I got some good ideas of what we don't pay for anymore, and what we pay less for, and for, in addition, the new industries, the new places of employment which are productive, which will enable us, as our government, to afford to make these adjustments. So you have to consider two things. The provisions are morally correct. They're necessary. How do we pay for them? We pay for them by not paying for some junk we're paying for now, like high prescription prices, that sort of thing. We pay for them by eliminating junk. We pay for them for providing mass transit systems so people don't have to choke on highways for 2.5 hours to get to and from work, and that sort of thing. So we build a more efficient, physically efficient economy, more powerful economy, with better technology. We don't have to have all these white-collar workers. We don't need it. White collars just get dirty quicker. We don't need that. What we need is high technology emphasis on high degrees of productivity. We need capital-intensive, progressive investment. We need to decentralize much of our production. So we distribute our production across the countryside as an agriculture and industry, so that every part of the country you have options for work, for employment, in communities within a reasonable commuting time each day. You have all the necessities of life taken care of, like general hospitals in every area that can be the matrix for dealing with the requirements of the health of the population. And we're going to have to socialize a lot of things, especially for the elderly, the ill, and for education. We're going to have to pay for it. So therefore, if you have to pay for it, old-fashioned way, go to work and earn it.